Our lesson today has a very odd title. Tax cheats guarantee that the poor will always exist. Today, many initiatives, public and private, are being carried out to combat poverty. All this, on the one hand, is a growth in humanity. In the Bible, the poor, the orphans, the widows, those that are discarded by society in those times, were aided by tithing and the gleaning of the grain. But most of the people remained poor. That aid was not sufficient to feed and care for every one. There were many discarded by society. Today we have invented other ways to care for, to feed, to teach the poor. And some of the seeds of the Bible have blossomed into more effective institutions than those of the past. The rationale for taxes also lies in the solidarity, which is negated by tax avoidance, tax evasion, which, over and above being illegal acts, are acts which deny the basic law of life, mutual care, and also the fundamental laws which underwrite the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. The great economist Thomas Locke wrote about how all boats must rise equally in the good times, and in the bad times, all boats must fall. And yet, in the 4 years that we suffered, 2016 to 2020, the boats that were very high in the tide continued going higher. And many of us, far, far too many, never saw our tide rise. Not even 1 inch. But here, now, our tide is rising just a little bit. And the rich begrudge us that little bit. Some of them are just fine giving some of their money because they know they got it out of our pockets. The tax refund or the reduction of the tax code that occurred in 2017 was illegal. It violated the basic tenets of the United States, and it violated every code of justice because it enriched directly. It directly enriched people that you knew and could see and look outside and name. No country, especially never the United States, should ever enrich people, individuals, and be able to speak their names. 117 people were enriched the greatest amounts, one of them being Donald Trump. But, and this can never be said enough, capitalism continues to produce discarded people for whom it would then like to care for. The principal ethical dilemma of this capitalism is the creation of discarded people, then trying to hide them or make sure they are no longer seen. A serious form of poverty in a civilization is when it is no longer able to see its poor, who are first discarded and then hidden or made to disappear from the society at large, giving all the impression that this issue of the poor has been solved. There is no, quote, issue of the poor, close quote. The issue is that they are alive, and that is quite inconvenient of them. The rich will tell you that at every opportunity. And the second issue is that they simply don't do as they are told. And this is inconsiderate to others, especially after they've been given more than sufficient food to see them on their way, and then given city purchased bus tickets so all these poor could do what they wished for all this time. They can go stay with family members in other cities and never return here, but live on that city's streets. Yes, that's been done. And there was a huge lawsuit about it. The cities that did it: Los Angeles, California, right before the Olympics in the late 90s. Chicago, Illinois. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Buffalo, New York. Lake Placid, New York. Atlanta, Georgia. Houston, Texas, 3 times. Dallas, Fort Worth, 5 times in 1 year. And yet, surprise, though they bust hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of people out of the state, they had to leave and go at least 500 miles away. But then they turned around, and there were more and more and more poor people there that were not on any buses. Where did they come from? That's the funniest thing about the poor. Funny irony. Those of us who are poor, we don't all look the same. For myself, I right now am 40% below the federal poverty limit. And yet, I look to be somewhere in the great middle class. How does that happen? Because I never spend a dime on anything other than food, my mortgage, working on this house, cat food for my sweethearts, and energy for the house. 72% of all of my income goes to the mortgage, which is going up again next month. So it'll become 81% of my full month's income will be going entirely to my housing, because they were able to sell some of these horrible properties around here. My property is 1,925 square feet. They sold 5 that were smaller, 5 that were in worse shape than mine, 5 that had no mod cons, 5 that were just really disgusting properties. One that was 1,600 square feet. They sold for $425,000. I bought this house for $96,000 in 1996. But because they sold these houses for $450, $395, $375, $375, and $350, my property value has now increased by 17%. And my taxes have increased in 1 year by 21%. Yeah, we're living great now. Where is that bus?